Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on the Ford F-150. We're going to be servicing the rear brakes. First thing we're going to do is use a jack. I usually jack from the rear differential and use two supporting jacks on the rear axle. The next thing I do is I chock both front wheels. Using an impact driver and a 3/4 inch wrench socket, we're going to remove 5 lug nuts to the rim and move the rim off to the side. Okay, so you're going to be using a kit like this by Bendix or wherever you get your parts, but we're going to use the Bendix Fleet Matlog. And the kit will come with four pads and your brake lubricant and some metal slide retainer clips. Next, you're going to take a 10mm socket wrench and remove the upper bolt on the caliper and the lower bolt on the caliper. You want to take note of the orientation of the retainer clips and the way the pad's installed onto the caliper. It looks like it's a snap fit, and the bottom one as well. Once the two bolts are removed, you should be able to lift up on the rotor like so and lift it up, set it off to the side. I'm going to set it up here on the leaf springs. The top piece comes off and the bottom piece. Once the caliper is removed, we can now slip the rotor off of the wheel studs. And set that aside. Next thing is we can inspect the e-brake horseshoes, and those look pretty good. Before we assemble all this, we'll go ahead and clean this really well with some brake clean. You can buy this stuff pretty cheap, about $4 at AutoZone. Okay, just got the rotors back from the local O'Reilly's. Guy just turned them for me. They're ready to go, so we're just going to go ahead and put them back on the hub. Like that. Push them back all the way. Next thing we're going to do is grab the abutment clips for the caliper. I think that's how you say that. And then set one on here and on the top. Now that we have the abutment clips seated completely, we put a little bit of grease on the top. Okay, next we're going to grab the caliper we set on the leaf springs. We're going to take a screwdriver underneath here and pop this one up and this one up and remove the pad from the one side. Next, we're going to remove the pad that's clipped onto the inside of the caliper piston. What you're going to do is grab hold of it, push it forward, and it pops right off. Set that one to the side. Next, we're going to take out the bolt that's in between these grommets by pushing it backwards and lifting the grommet off of the groove and pushing it forward. So this bolt has two grooves. Slip it out, and there's one on both sides. Two bolts. Next, we're going to apply some grease to both of the bolts that slide in the rubber grommet. This allows the caliper to slide back and forth. After there's grease on the bolt, we're going to insert the bolt pin back into the rubber grommets. Once you get the bolt past the first grommet, just put your thumbs behind the bolt and press the grommet over the groove. That way the bolt can slide in the caliper housing. If you have a lot of rust on the piston, go ahead and brush it off, clean it off, and apply some grease to the face of the piston. So once both bolts are applied in the grommets, go ahead and shift them back and forth and make sure they slide. Wipe off any excess grease. Before you compress the piston in the caliper, you want to open the hood of your vehicle and locate the oil reservoir for the brake master cylinder. Once the cap is removed, you're going to start compressing the piston into the caliper, and the fluid is going to be displaced as you compress. The level will rise. You want to make sure that the oil doesn't spill over the reservoir here. If the level starts to rise and spill over, you can wipe some up, but try to take some out before you compress the piston. Next, you're going to take the old pad and place it on the face of the piston.
Oh, there it is.
And compress the piston into the caliper using a clamp. I'm using a 6-inch clamp. Apply some grease to the face of the piston. Once the piston is compressed, we can go ahead and add our pad to the piston of the caliper. This is the one that goes on the inside, and this clip here snaps into the piston of the caliper. You're going to set it in there and force it straight in, like that. Next, grab the other pad that came in the kit and orientate it the same way as the rotor. And what you're going to do is force it down like this until these clips snap into the holes of the caliper. Apply some grease. You're going to apply some grease to this side of the pad and this notch of the pad, as well as the one in the front on both pads. These pads will rest here. You want to make sure that the bolt is pushed back on both sides. Just like that.
Go.
Next, you're going to take your 10mm bolts, and as we took them off, go ahead and thread those back into the caliper mount. This locks down the caliper to the mount. Next, you're going to take a torque wrench with a 10mm socket and torque both bolts to 22 foot-pounds. Until it clicks. Then do the next side. Okay. You can take some anti-seize for bolts and add some to each wheel stud. Go ahead and set the wheel on and install the lug nuts. And remove your jack stands. And lower the jack. Grab your 1/2-inch torque wrench, the 3/4-inch socket, and torque each lug nut to 150 foot-pounds. Next, you want to wipe up any oil that may have spilt. Put the cap back on and give it a wash. Okay, now we got the wheels on, torqued on, and the brakes replaced. There's a couple things that you need to consider before we go ahead and start the vehicle. So the brakes that we just replaced, because we had to compress the pistons, they're not properly primed or loaded. So the first thing you want to do for safety reasons is pump the brakes. Get the fluid in the calipers and get them expanded and ready to brake. This primes and sets the calipers. Holding the brake with the brake pedal firm, after pumping, go ahead and start the vehicle. Notice your foot's going to drop to the floor. With the vehicle running, keep pressing the rear brakes, pumping the brakes. The next thing to consider before putting it in drive or reverse is to take note if there's any objects in front of your vehicle or in the rear of your vehicle. If there's something in the front of your vehicle, you need to reverse the vehicle. If there's something in the rear of your vehicle, you need to make sure you put the vehicle in drive. You want to do this to make sure that if your brakes aren't set and primed, that if you're going in drive, you don't want to run into the object. The object is to not run into anything and safely go and do your test drive. So let's go do a test drive. Okay, for the brake test, we're going to be hitting the brake several times. You want to make sure the e-brake's not on and that we can drive forward. And don't forget the chocks that were in front of the front wheels at the beginning of the video. For the brake test, what I like to do is I like to hit the brake several times and gas, just to make sure that the wheels and the rotors and the pads seat and are properly seated to each other. So I drive real slow for about 15-20 miles an hour, and then I hit the brakes. And then I do that again several times, driving forward and backwards. So drive and slowly come to a stop. In reverse, gas, brake. Put it back in drive, and just go ahead and drive around the blocks a couple times. And get your brakes working together with the rotors and getting them seated. Hey, if you like this video and it helps you out replacing your rear brakes on your Ford F-150, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, and check out some of my other useful videos that may be helpful to you. Thanks for watching.